The rain had barely stopped when the city lights began to flicker on, scattering reflections across the wet pavement like broken pieces of a forgotten dream. People hurried through the streets, shielding themselves from the cold wind, clutching bags of groceries and cups of coffee, each lost in the rush of their own lives. But among that hurried crowd, one small moment was unfolding, quiet, fragile, yet powerful enough to change a life forever. For sometimes, the biggest transformations begin with the smallest acts of kindness. It started with a little girl tugging on her father's sleeve as they stepped out of a warm bakery, holding a small box of pastries meant to be their shared treat for the evening. Her father, Daniel, worked long hours at a construction company and rarely had time to bring her out after school. But today he had arrived early, wanting to make up for the many evenings he'd missed. His daughter, Lily, beamed up at him, swinging her legs with carefree joy as they walked down the sidewalk. To her, the world was bright and simple. She didn't know the stress etched into her father's shoulders, nor the silent pressures he carried inside his chest. But she did notice something. Ahead of them, sitting quietly near a bus stop bench, was a woman wrapped in an old, oversized coat. Her hair was tangled, her hands trembling lightly as she rubbed them together for warmth. She stared at the ground, as if she was trying to disappear into it. People walked past her without a second glance. Her presence seemed invisible, like a shadow blending into the background of the city. As they approached, Lily slowed her steps. She looked at the woman, then at the pastry box in her hand. Her father noticed her hesitation, gently guiding her forward so they wouldn't stop in the middle of the busy sidewalk. But Lily pulled lightly on his jacket, her voice soft but filled with something he hadn't expected. It was a question so innocent, so pure, that it struck deeper than anything he had heard in a long time. She asked if they could share their food with the hungry woman. The words landed on Daniel like a sudden weight. He paused mid-step, his heart tightening as he realized he hadn't even noticed the woman. He had walked right past her while worrying about bills, debts, and deadlines. His daughter had seen something he had forgotten how to see, a human being simply needing compassion. He turned to look at the woman again. She didn't lift her head. Her body seemed defeated, as if life had pushed her to the very edges of hope. The box in his hand suddenly felt heavier, and the warmth of the bakery's air lingering on it began to fade under the chill of the evening. He crouched to Lily's height, feeling torn between wanting to protect their small treat and wanting to teach her the right thing. But she was already watching him with hopeful eyes, waiting for his answer. In that moment, he realized this was more than just sharing food, it was an opportunity to show her what real humanity looked like. They approached the woman slowly, and even though she didn't look up at first, she seemed to feel their presence. Her weary eyes lifted, revealing exhaustion mixed with something deeper, embarrassment, maybe fear, maybe the quiet grief of someone who had been ignored too many times. Before he could speak, Lily stepped forward and held out the pastry box with her tiny hands. The woman blinked, startled by the gesture. She hesitated, as if unsure whether she deserved it, but Lily's innocent smile softened her expression, and for the first time in a long time, the woman allowed herself to accept something freely offered. Daniel felt something shift inside him. The heaviness he had carried all day had begun to dissolve, replaced by a warm sense of clarity. He asked the woman if she had eaten anything, and when she whispered no, her voice barely audible, he realized how close people could be to suffering without leaving a trace visible to the world. They sat beside her for a moment, watching her eat with quiet gratitude. And as they did, Daniel found himself wondering about her story. She looked like someone who had once lived a normal life, someone who might have had a job, a home, maybe a family. Life had a way of breaking people down without warning. When the pastry was gone, she thanked them with trembling words that carried the weight of her struggle. Daniel didn't want to leave her there, with nothing but a thin coat against the cold night. But he also didn't know what he could do without crossing boundaries or making promises he couldn't keep. Still, something inside him insisted that he couldn't just walk away. Not this time, not after seeing his daughter's compassion, not after feeling a spark inside himself that had long been missing. So he asked if she needed a warm meal. Her eyes widened slightly, as though she wasn't sure she had heard him correctly. He offered his hand, not as charity, but as a gesture of dignity, and invited her to join them at a nearby café. Lily held the woman's other hand, guiding her with gentle confidence. And for the first time in years, the woman walked with someone instead of behind them, feeling included rather than overlooked. Inside the café, the warmth wrapped around them like a soft blanket. People glanced at them curiously, but Daniel kept his head high. He wasn't ashamed of helping someone. If anything, he felt a pride he hadn't experienced in a long time. They found a small table tucked in a corner, where the woman could eat without feeling exposed. As she slowly sipped hot soup, more energy returned to her tired face. Daniel introduced himself, and after a moment of hesitation, she whispered her name, Maria. It was the first piece of her identity she had shared with someone in months. Little by little, she opened up. Not everything, not the full story, just fragments that hinted at the pain she carried. She had lost her job 2 years ago, then her home, then everything else that held her life together. She had tried to rebuild, but it felt like every door closed before she even reached it. She had become afraid of asking for help, afraid of being judged, afraid of being seen only as her misfortune. But sitting there with a man and his daughter, she began to feel something she had forgotten, hope. As Maria talked, Daniel felt his chest tighten with empathy. He realized how fragile life could be, how close any person could come to losing everything. And he wondered how many people like her walked the same streets he did every day, invisible to the world. Lily, unaware of the complexities of Maria's situation, simply smiled and drew small hearts on a napkin with a crayon she kept in her pocket. She offered it to Maria as if giving her a priceless gift. And in a way, she did. It was a reminder that kindness didn't need to be complicated. After finishing the meal, Daniel insisted on getting Maria a warm jacket from a nearby shop. She protested at first, but he gently assured her that it wasn't charity, it was simply helping someone who deserved better. Maria eventually agreed, tears welling in her eyes as she realized how long it had been since someone cared about her comfort. The jacket fit her perfectly, and she hugged it close as though it carried all the warmth she had been missing. They walked out of the shop, and Maria stopped to look at them, really look at them. Her voice cracked as she said something that made Daniel's chest tighten. She told them that they hadn't just fed her stomach, they had fed her soul. She said, she had been days away from giving up, from believing there was no goodness left in the world. But their kindness had reminded her that there was still beauty, still compassion, still humanity. Daniel felt his eyes sting. He didn't expect this moment to affect him so deeply, but it did. It reminded him of his own struggles, of how close he had once come to breaking under the weight of life. And he realized how much he had forgotten about the importance of giving, the importance of seeing people. He asked Maria where she would stay that night, and when she admitted she had nowhere safe, his decision was immediate. He arranged for her to stay at a small women's shelter nearby, a place known for treating people with dignity. The staff welcomed her, offering warm bedding and support that could help her rebuild her life. Maria hugged Lily tightly before entering the shelter, whispering gratitude that carried more emotion than words could express. She looked at Daniel with tears streaming down her face, thanking him for seeing her not as a burden, but as a person. As they watched her disappear inside, Lily squeezed her father's hand. He felt proud, proud of her, proud of the choices they had made together, proud of rediscovering a part of himself he thought he had lost. On the walk home, the city lights seemed brighter. The air felt warmer. Daniel realized that change didn't always require grand gestures. Sometimes it began with noticing someone who had been overlooked. Sometimes it began with a child's question and a heart willing to listen. Days passed, then weeks, and Daniel wondered often about Maria. He hoped she was healing, rebuilding, rediscovering her strength. Then, one bright afternoon, he received a call from the shelter saying Maria wanted to see them. He brought Lily along, and when they arrived, they saw a transformed woman standing at the entrance. Her hair was brushed, her eyes clearer, her posture stronger. She looked like someone reclaiming her life piece by piece. She hugged them both, explaining that she had been able to get counseling, access job training programs, and start planning for stable housing. She told them that their kindness had given her the courage to try again, to believe again. Her voice didn't tremble anymore, it carried hope. Daniel felt a warmth in his chest unlike anything he had felt in years. He realized this wasn't just about helping someone else. It was also about healing himself. About remembering what truly mattered in a world that often blinded people with stress and routine. Time passed, and Maria continued to rebuild her life, slowly but steadily. And every now and then, she visited Daniel and Lily, bringing small gifts or just sharing stories. She became a part of their lives, not as someone they had helped, but as a friend who had taught them something profound. One evening, as Daniel tucked Lily into bed, she